All right, awesome. So I'll just start. We don't want to take up anyone's time. So I'm Crystal. Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thanks for being patient as we postponed and rescheduled, but I'm happy to be on with Jason Vastardis, LPC. And as part of KD Coaching, we've been doing pretty much regular lives. I took a little bit of a break because I started a new job, but whenever our hearts get pulled to do a certain topic, whether it's, something heavy, funny, mental health, recovery, whatever it is, I want to bring it to the table so that we can, educate people and get people's input. So feel free to engage, comment, ask questions. But today's topic we're doing on politics. And let me get the exact title. I don't want to mess this up. We're pretty
it's politics and healing. How to walk the
creative
line
with it.
How to walk the line, politics and healing.
Yeah, so from politics to healing, exactly. How to walk a fine line.
Yeah.
So do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure.
And then we can jump into kind of what this means for us.
Yeah. Hey, everyone, I'm Jason. Known Crystal for, gosh, I started Parkside at 2013. I think you came in 2014.
Yeah.
So we've known each other for 8 years now. Can you believe that already? Always happy to be a guest, always anxious beforehand, always grateful afterwards. So this is probably, I wanted this topic because I'm triggered greatly by this topic. And that's different than passionate. I am triggered by it. I'm triggered by the topic of politics, talking politics. It is a very activating topic. And that's why I felt like we should talk about it, because it's so triggering. And then because there's no real consensus on how to be a therapist or a life coach and navigate discussing politics with your clients. So I think the subsection is ultimately for therapists and healers about how to do this kind of work in session, but it's also a larger topic of just how do we navigate the world of politics. So this is a topic I have the least amount of answers for and the most amount of questions, right? I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to ask questions of myself, of you, and hopefully of the audience to enrich the discussion, not to end the discussion. Because I think what I've noticed with politics online, everyone wants to say the buzz line that ends the conversation. Nobody is inviting further discussion. It's always like, this is it, boom, mic drop. Like everyone wants that mic drop moment. And I'm trying to do the opposite.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't think everything with politics and this topic's always got to be negative. I think it definitely challenges viewpoints and relationships. And for whatever reason, I just noticed the biggest negative impact when COVID hit, because we were all forced to do a lot of our connecting online.
Right.
And voice how we were feeling, and a lot of political movements and events going on. So that's where people discussed things but weren't respectful of other people's opinions, and myself included have had 2 friendships end over it. So yeah, for me it is very triggering.
Yeah, I feel like, I too have lost friendships over politics. COVID, I think, expedited political pressures. Like if you think of politic pressure as a time, or as like a pressure cooker, I think COVID added to pressure to pressurize this, because I don't remember politics ever feeling as intense, as entrenched, and as polarized as now. It feels like you have to be A or B. I feel like there's no more moderates. There's no one in the middle anymore trying to hear out 2 sides. It's like the choice is wildly one camp or wildly the other. And that I think is part of this dilemma, right?
So for our generation, and even before and after us, but for us specifically, do you have any thoughts on why it's that way? For us, is it more so because it's like we take it personal? I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but think about it. Like, we're not a first generation, so a lot of our parents or generations before us had very strong opinions about certain things. So it's almost like if we follow their their viewpoints or their footsteps,
Right.
we almost personalize like everything that we feel and everything that we stand for, so that when other people come against it, it's almost like an attack on like not only your family, but like it's so much bigger. So do you have any thoughts on that?
I do think social media has changed the game with political discourse because it targets certain information to the certain audience members. So we're getting, you know, the term I hear a lot is echo chamber. We're getting certain key data regularly put in our awareness over and over again, and we're not getting other data. So we're getting incomplete data. And I think it's causing it so the same information is being passed around the same circle with no new information being added.
Yeah.
And so again, there's no discussion. There's like, this is what we believe. I also think, you know, I'm going to hold the politicians accountable. I don't see any attempt to agree on anything. I see us and you. So I want to believe back in my childhood that politicians would do this thing where they're like, well, we agree on this common ground, but we have different opinions about this. And I could get behind that. Politicians don't even agree on basic reality anymore. And that's scary. If politics was analogous to a parent's marriage, mom and dad are having no shared reality, agreeing on nothing, and they're choosing loyalty from their children, which is what it feels like. I feel like I'm in a hostile divorce right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like parents are fighting and they're limiting what information they tell us, and they're demanding loyalty, and they're using our loyalty against the other one. And it feels very vindictive. And like, I yearn for the days where it would at least start with like, we agree on this stuff. This is where we agree, and these are why we have difference of opinions. And I don't see that anymore. And I think it's really hurting us collectively and hurting us as people.
Yeah. So it's interesting that as you were talking, I was kind of also thinking about this. You know, when people go into therapy, or the like a light bulb goes off, whether with a friend or somebody, and realize like the moment like I have to work on this, or there's something wrong, like that light bulb that goes off for some people.
Yeah.
The next thing is realizing that like change has to be made.
Right.
And I feel like certain people's opinions when it comes to politics, it challenges everything you've ever thought to be true, or everything you've ever been taught, or like your core beliefs, just as much as your behavior. So like you get that realization that like, oh, this may actually not be true, or I don't know, there's a lot of things that are challenged when your beliefs are challenged. So and those things, they shape everything about you and who you are. So maybe that's part of the personalization, now that I'm like saying it out loud, is like, not that we like, it's just part of our foundation, these beliefs and things that we stand for. So when they're challenged, why wouldn't we take them personal?
Well, politics is heavily influenced by culture, right? So I grew up in a certain culture where certain policies would benefit the group I was like a member of, or the community I was a member of. And then I would start talking to people who are in much different communities where policies had a detrimental effect, and vice versa. So, you know, as I've gotten older, I have this growing awareness that laws do not affect everyone equally, which really,
correct.
Which when I was young, I didn't know that. And now I can really see it. Same laws do not affect everyone the same way. And so I think when we're talking about how personal it feels, right? It's personal. And this, I was trying to think like, what are the differences and similarities between politics and religion? It's both really passionate beliefs. People tend to be fairly entrenched, but religious beliefs don't feel as personal to me. And I think one of the reasons is your religious practice doesn't affect me. The way you vote can affect my life because you're voting for people that make laws that govern my life. So it is actually personal in a sense, in a really literal sense, like how I vote will affect you. And that is not true from a lot of other things. And so I think we feel that, and maybe that's one of the reasons it gets so hostile, is like, how could you vote for that person? They're going to take away my rights, right? Like, it's not, what is your theory on political government, or what are your philosophies on how to manage a state? It's, when you vote that way, you hurt me, so I hate you. And I see a lot of that this day, right? These days, I just see a lot of like, because you believe that, you're hurting me in a
Yeah.
way I've never seen before.
So you're mentioning some big things. So a threat or feeling threatened in any situation on any topic, whenever somebody feels threatened, it's enough to cause some kind of turmoil. So that's what we're seeing, people feeling threatened, which is a great point because I didn't think of it that way. Then the second thing is change, whether it's a core belief, right? Because like think about like when COVID happened, that's a great example.
Yeah.
You know, that would probably be the one scenario that made other people who were firmly in one stance or on one side of the room think like, oh, wait a minute, this might be like something different than what I perceived it to be. And, you know, just like there's just a lot happening that almost forced a lot of people to see another side of things. But that's not always the case with everything. So I just feel like part of that is just shaking people's core beliefs sometimes. Like, it's not that you have to be a conspiracist or how do you say that? Conspiracy theorist or anything like that, but being open to like the possibility that some things sometimes aren't what they're perceived to be, and that literally like it shakes people. You know, it's like you know a person and then you find out like maybe there's somebody else. I don't know. So that like core belief of like, maybe this isn't really what I thought it was as a kid, or maybe it's not what my family raised me to believe it is. So it's just very unsettling.
Yeah, I think COVID is a good example because COVID and the way governments interacted with COVID policy, for the first time on like this level of scale, people didn't trust why government bodies were doing what they were doing in a way I'd never seen before personally. Now, I know there's a lot of people who that's been their reality their whole life. There's never any trust in government. But this felt like it hit the mainstream. Like it wasn't just periphery communities or small communities. This is suddenly large groups of people saying like, we don't know what you're doing. We don't trust what you're saying is real. We don't trust what you're trying to give us in terms of vaccines. So there's just so little trust in like the shared story of what's happening.
Yeah.
Right. People didn't believe the virus existed, or if they did, they didn't think it was harmful, or that the vaccines worked, or if they did, they were hidden with some, you know, deadly ingredients or something like that. And again, I've never seen the level of mass scale reaction to this discussion like I've seen beginning with COVID. I think COVID was a huge turning point in our world with how politics is discussed. Because before COVID, the big thing was Trump being elected. I think was like world changing because he has no political background. He's a celebrity. He got elected in the most powerful seat, and like that changed the game. And a lot of marriages ended during the Trump era. Let me put it that way. A lot of friendships. You know, Trump was a very polarizing force, so it was very divisive in some ways. But I think to go back to the original question, how do we as healers do work with clients in this new world we're in, where politics feels divisive, feels threatening? It's hard to know what's real and what isn't. Like belief in politicians, I feel like is an all-time low. And your clients are probably going to ask you, which side do you vote for? Might be one of the first things they ask. And I was, you know, before this meeting, I was trying to look up, like, is there a rule about answering the question? And there's no rule. It's what do you think? Should you tell a client how you vote? Right? What are the risks? What are the rewards? So what are your thoughts about, I think let's start small with this, because there's so much we can do with this. I want to try to contain it. So let's start at step one. You have a brand new client. You don't know anything about them. The first thing they ask you is, what is your political affiliation? How would you answer that, Crystal? What would you do with that loaded question?
That is honestly one question I wouldn't answer. And I would probably say something generic like, there's certain things that I choose to disclose, but this is definitely not one of them.
Yeah.
And here, part of it is not only for the reasons we mentioned, because my core beliefs are different than a lot of people, and you don't dump all yours as a coach or a therapist on your client. Like, you just don't do that.
Right.
You know, our trust issues, like, we have to continue to work on. You don't dump that on a client.
Right.
And then when we're perceiving threat, it looks different for everybody. So I definitely wouldn't dump that on a client either. But then you have all these other layers we have yet to talk about, which is a cultural and racial lines that are crossed sometimes with that. Right. And
Right.
as a client, like, I don't discriminate or do any of that with my client. Like, everyone, doesn't matter race wise, you know, like, I don't have a preference. But race and cultural differences come up in therapy and coaching all the time.
Right.
Like, that would be something, if your politics in some way were shaped by that, like, it wouldn't be healthy to be working with somebody and have to be transparent about that, you know?
Yeah. So in other words, with race, there's an race you see, right? So ethnicities, you can see if you're aligned or if you're different.
Yeah,
Politics, you don't know until you answer the question.
exactly.
Right. So it's a hidden identity. And I agree. I think my instincts are not to answer the question head on, but to sort of say, it sounds like you're trying to establish trust and safety. And the way I'm going to make you feel safe and I'm going to earn your trust is by my questions, not my answers.
Yeah.
So it's something I'll do a lot with clients is I'm going to earn your respect the old fashioned way. I'm going to ask you intelligent questions and you'll walk away feeling like it was a fruitful discussion. I'm not going to answer them about me because I think that's a trap.
Well,
it's a trap
it is.
when it makes it about me.
And also, I would question why they'd want to know that so much about you. More, is it to relate
Safety.
or is it to judge?
I think it's safety. Well, am I safe here? Because again, the second question is it even appropriate to treat across the aisles anymore? Like, if you're a Democrat, are you trained on how to work with Republicans and vice versa? If you're a Republican, do you know how to work with Democrats? Because there's two different conversations happening among those groups.
Yeah.
Right? There's different language, there's different focal points, right? And certain words reveal your political affiliation. Woke is a word that if you use it in a sentence, someone's going to know which side of the aisle you're on, right? There's other like really subtle examples. If you use these words, there's connotation that's the aisle you're on. So you have to be careful what cards you reveal. If your goal is not to let the client know your politics, certain words will reveal that. Right?
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but I guess that's true with anything if you think about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like the cultural and racial, that's like a whole nother layer of that. It's interesting when you say like there's no other class like discussions, I feel, that bring up so much. Like religion would bring up a lot, but like for some reason, like you said, like
doesn't feel as threatening.
This feels way more threatening than talking about different religion. And maybe because more people are now open to all the different sectors, there's more options, you know, and with politics, it's kind of like very black and white. You're either red or blue, and there's no in between for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So maybe that the fact that there's not as many options makes it that much more threatening.
Which, again, not to get into like problem solving, I wish one day we had 4 or 6 parties that were of equal power, because I think that would enrich discussion. If you have to choose A or B, it's not a really rich discussion, but 6 options, there's richness there. So I think part of it is that this is a binary topic. Like, it's A or B. Are you a Democrat or Republican? Because I only work with one party, right? Yeah. So there's like the cutting off point I see with a lot of people. I want to believe I can work with people across the aisle. I don't know if that's true, or I don't know if I could do it for a long time without it showing up in the work. And I'm curious what your thoughts are about you working across the aisle.
It's really interesting. Like. It might be I don't want to say the kind of clients. I don't want to say that, but maybe there is some truth to that. Like, so demographically, if you think about it, right? Or like even across practices, like versus, let's just say areas. Let's just keep it very like.
Isn't this like, don't you feel like you're tiptoeing right now? Like that's
Yeah.
part of this is I feel like we're both walking on eggshells just to even talk about this. But go on. I want to name it.
I think I can say it without feeling. Yeah. So depending on your area, like it's no wonder we would have certain people that come to us for healing or help, right? Like you wouldn't get the same demographic population that you would expect to get if you're out of the city versus in the city. Like it's going to look different. Just geographically,
right?
All that's going to be different, right?
But we're in telehealth world, and Pennsylvania.
That's true.
Is a purple state. It is a very passionate red and blue state, and because of telehealth, I can work with someone in rural Pennsylvania as much as I can work with someone in urban Pennsylvania, which means it's a coin flip if I get a Republican or a Democrat in some ways.
So I think for me, because I'm always a CBT, like that drives my approach with patients or clients. So I always get to like, I've never really had a patient be like, oh my God, actually one in my whole lifetime that I can actually like think of that comes to the forefront of like that drives the conversation. But to me, like, I just think it's a means to deflect. Because if you think about that, a whole session could go by and they're so focused on all these external triggers that I'm like, what's going on with you? Like, let's bring it back.
Yeah.
And I do a good job at like not avoiding what's hurting or not being dismissive, but it's more so like with the CBT, it's like a different underlying approach that I take to like what's really going on. Why does that bother you so much?
Right. And agreed. I think if you're able to redirect the client to what they're yearning for, which my understanding is probably a sense of safety or a sense that they'll be understood.
Yes.
Like when clients ask me personal questions, I think that's sort of an umbrella of what do they want? They want to know that I can see them, that I can validate their experience, that I'm not going to jump to conclusions, and they're safe to talk openly with me.
Yeah.
So, and to be clear, no one has asked me my political belief recently, but it's going to happen. And it's actually great if I know my plan for that in advance, because I feel like as of now, I wing it. And I'd rather have like a more cohesive plan of what to do, because it's got to come up more and more. The political landscape is getting more profound, polarized, and intense. It's not calming down.
You know what's interesting?
What?
So I have two things for me. I'm a female and I'm a minority in a sense.
Yeah.
Not in a sense, I am a minority.
Yeah.
So depending on, like, so some people might not, who don't know me would, assume that I'm Italian and white, right? But that minority piece is huge, because I've literally had people like, just, how do we say this? Based on where I'm at or what where I'm at, let's just say that, be like assume that they know which side I'm on based on those two things. Like female, you have certain needs or certain things that you may rely on certain services for because you're female, right?
Right.
And then the fact that I'm a minority, so like, oh yeah, you voted for such and such, right? Or if you don't vote, this, and this is going to be taken away. So you get like lumped into this thing, or people just assume. And I don't go to the actual saying the lengths to like explain that. It's kind of a trap. I think people assume things all the time. But I think that's interesting. I'm wondering, as like a white male, if you feel like people just assume they know what you
people
stand
assume
for.
I'm more conservative.
Yes.
Especially with I don't know if you noticed my recent haircut, especially with my hairstyle, the way it is, just the thing I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
A lot of people think I've been in the military. Military tends to be conservative.
Yep.
Right. White men tend to vote conservative. Small business owners tend to vote conservative. I'm a white male with short hair who owns a business. So I get a lot of those projections.
Yep.
But then I'm this weird thing that I'm an emotionally sensitive therapist. What do you do with that? Like, that doesn't compute with all the other parts of me, right? So the fact that I'm emotional and give space for people to cry, that doesn't quite fit certain demographic stereotypes either.
Yeah.
So people usually get confused by me is the short answer. They don't know what to make of me.
Well, I think you make a good point, which is whoever's watching this, it's not talked about enough about disclosure. And I've been put in very awkward situations that I've had to learn from.
Right.
Especially the deeper you get into the type of work that we're doing, you almost feel like, you know, and the manipulation might come, right? Like I've trusted you. I've told you so much and I don't know anything about you.
Right.
I've gotten that a lot.
Which is a trap, which is it's a power play. Now that I've shared with you, I'm not going to feel safe unless you give it up.
Yeah.
And that's my recommendation. What I've had success with is just naming that. What's it like that we're one-sided?
Yeah.
Because that was sort of agreed upon. Therapy is a one-sided relationship. What's it like that you don't get to know as much about me as I know about you?
Yeah.
And then I think you get into stuff about being witnessed and vulnerability. But kind of to circle back, one of the questions I have for clients when they bring up politics is, what are the major things you care about in politics? I mean, politics covers everything. And what I've learned is most people only care about 1 to 3 topics, right? Whatever the reasons they vote is not a vast, comprehensive analysis. It's, I vote because this politician cares about 3 things that I care about, like 1 to 3 things. And so usually it's good to figure out, well, what are the 1 to 3 things you really care about, and how's that personal? So one of the ways of like exploring it, why are these topics the most important to you? What is the origin story? And then suddenly I get into background stuff, which feels useful, right? Their history growing up, why they were taught what they were taught, and why those 1 to 3 topics mean so much to them.
I can answer that. I might as well get raw with you. Why don't I?
Oh, always. So yeah, what are the major voting topics? You don't have to answer how you voted on them.
No.
Because I want to preserve your anonymity politically. But what are some of the key topics that you have passions about?
Yeah, no, I have them, but it's interesting because when I say them, it's like directly related to what I care about, like literally, and like what's presently affecting me right now, and which I feel like is really important when you're taking things personal to realize, like, it's not personal, it's what people literally like. We have purpose in life. So one of mine is my career. When I see legislation passed for certain like drug related things that I just can't wrap my head around, pharmaceuticals, FDA approved things that are like super addictive, like I get so passionate about that because I'm in a field of recovery.
Right.
So like any drug type of
so
policy
that regulate drug manufacturer, drug fencing, you would have a strong voting principle based off that.
Yes, in fact, it's funny, I have Evelyn on here. But side note, there's a somebody, a family member here.
Hey, Evelyn.
Oh, wow. So she sent me a article as we're talking about this, a horrifying drug called Trank dope, which for me is not a new thing, but it says it's spreading in the United States.
What's it called?
Trank.
Trank?
It's also called, it's big too in Jersey. I gotta get the name for it, but it's like pill form, and it's literally for like a tranquilizer or a downer, but they use it to mimic a opiate. And it's not traceable, like one of those up and coming, kind of like crocodile, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she had said we lost a special friend and relatives from this. But as I'm talking about like drug legislation, like all those things that come out, this is big because they'll like throw something out there and then later you find out that it's doing all this damage, but it's also like, it's part of the politics that really drive me nuts because, you know, people you trust, like you said, people trust certain legislation policies, and it ends up having sometimes a really bad effect on our bigger population. So that's one of them.
What's another one?
Another one's education for me.
Okay.
I don't want to go into too much detail, but that's a huge one.
Yeah. And the point isn't to go into super depths, it's just to acknowledge I vote based off maybe a handful of themes or topics, and that humanizes you, right? I think because like when I get someone that votes in a certain way that I don't understand, if I can understand their topics, then I can start to gain some kind of rapport with them.
Yeah.
Right. You know,
Yes. So I would say educate, like higher education for me.
okay.
And then the other one I'm gonna like lump together, but it would be like, okay, how do I say this?
Vaguely enough that it's not obvious. You can, I think
they're not relatable, but I'm gonna just say like I'm gonna lump them together anyway. Like gun or protective type of legislation slash women, let's say abused women, let's just say that, because then that lumps in a lot. So like rape, abort, all of that stuff, like abused women and their decision making, let's just say that.
Okay. And gun rights and abortion.
Yeah, so it's kind of like 4.
Right.
Yeah, so and like all of them I have a personal experience with, so like duh, it would definitely like affect why I see it a certain way. But if anybody saw it different, I've learned not to bash people's opinions, you know, because again, like exactly what you said, their experience could, maybe they never even went through any of it, so how could I expect someone to like be so passionate like me about it, you know what I mean?
Well, let's use the topic of gun regulation.
Yeah.
So someone who's anti-guns may have had experience where a gun was the reason someone they love died.
Exactly.
And someone who's pro-gun maybe have an experience where a gun is the reason they defended themselves and saved someone they love's life.
Exactly.
Right. And those two are really valid experiences, and they're never going to convince the other one because it's life.
Yeah.
It's life and death, right? You're not going to talk your way or convince someone with logic to change their mind about something that has personally affected them in terms of something as big as life or death.
Exactly.
So yeah, good stuff. Other questions are, what is the emotion they have when thinking about the political landscape currently? So for me, coming into this topic, I felt a myriad of emotions. First was fear. I felt fearful doing tonight's live stream because we're discussing politics. I also felt angry because politics makes me angry today. I felt inadequate because I feel like there's so much to learn and I don't know enough about it. And I felt determined to go through it anyway. None of those are pleasant feelings. And I'm a pretty emotionally well-regulated person. So imagine my client who might have other struggles on top of that, walking in on what kind of emotional charge do they have? What about you? What are the feelings you have with this topic coming in?
Ironically, empowerment.
Okay.
Because the old me would, like, if it was brought up at a dinner or anywhere, I didn't know enough, like you said, or care enough, let's say, to even engage it. So I think I pick and choose what I want to learn and what I need to digest. I have a good filter now. I think it's ridiculous to be completely out of the loop and not care at all. But then a part of me also,
well, that's a fun topic down the road that we can have about voter apathy.
Yeah, but so when I say empowering, it's like, I don't care if I don't watch the news 24/7 and know every governor, politician, yeah, like representative, like I don't care if I don't know all the names and the duties and legislations and policies that were passed and all of that. Like all I care about is that I know what's going on in the world. I know what side of things I stand on. And I have a right, if I want to make a difference, to vote and speak up. And if I choose not to, that's my right as well. I don't get mad if people don't vote. I don't get mad if they share what they vote for and it's not what I care about. Like I've really just learned to like, it's exactly what you said.
How did you get there? How did you get to the part where you're not angry on difference of voting and voter indifference?
Because of the simple fact that I really, when I look at it, the friendships that I lost, not to say that I regret it, because they weren't meant to be my life anyway, but like I think that is absolutely ridiculous to have somebody lose a potentially really great relationship over somebody having a different experience and viewpoint than you. and somebody who you're not even forced to actually like have an intimate relationship with. You can definitely be friends with people of different religions, different political standpoints, different cultural backgrounds. Like, that's what life's about. You learn from that. And there are a lot of people who don't see it that way. It's like, that's what you stand for. I can't deal with you.
Counterpoint.
Yeah, go ahead.
Counterpoint. For me, one of the things I search for in friendship is the ability to lower my guard.
Yeah.
And the ability to unwind. I don't feel I can do that across the aisle. Right? I'm gonna be real with you. I think it would be really difficult for me personally to maintain a strong friendship other than an acquaintance. When you say friend, I mean a friendship, someone I'm eager to speak with, someone I want to open my heart to. That would be difficult because my guard would be up. And I would feel like there's so many topics we couldn't talk about. It would then feel restraining, right? It would feel pretty restraining. And if we did talk about it, would it just escalate and turn into like a screaming match? Like, is it safe? So I want to get to the point you said you're at. I feel like I personally am pretty far from that.
It's okay. I think that's the way that people protect themselves, and we need protection in our life. You know, it looks different for everybody, but
yeah,
I think for me, like, maybe it's a boundary I subconsciously created where people around me, not that they can't talk about certain things, but I wouldn't have a whole dinner here and just talk about pot. Like, that's not the priority.
You don't want to have a whole motley crew of people talking politics over the dinner table.
Yeah, and that's a boundary.
That sounds like a small place in hell. I think if there's like a 9 circle of hell, it's a large table with everyone talking politics.
Exactly. But you understand, like, that's a boundary in your home you create, and we create them all the time with everything that we want to talk about, what we want to watch. Like, and I think people who've just gotten to know me know that I don't judge them, but I also have things that are more important to me versus others. So that's kind of how I nurture my relationships and friendships. I also think what helped was my field, like being in a field of going over 12 years now of all kinds of people who don't think and do things the way that I do. I've learned to just love people and like really care about them, and not really what differences we have. Because if I were that therapist or that coach, like it would be really hard for me to keep going.
Right.
Like, literally, Jason, I've had people talk about politics, but like complete atheists that I've had to work with. And I can't wrap my head around that. But it's not like I'd be like, I can't work with you. And in fact, I'm like, what did you go through in life that really, like...
It feels less personal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When they don't believe in God and you believe in God.
You've been through something.
Right.
Or it's just like you grew up in some type of way where that wasn't even fostered, and like your feelings are valid. Like, I actually get intrigued by that. Like, not that I need to be your best friend, but I will work with you.
Okay.
So it's just that kind of empathy that I've learned to have as a coach and counselor.
Again, originally I was talking about friendship.
Yeah.
But now we're talking about clients. So clinically, because there's distance, it's a lot easier as a clinician. So I've worked with people across the aisle, and I am.
Well, wait, let me stop you there. Why do you think that's so different then? From like your friendship to...
In friendship, my hope is to lower my guard. I have a vigilance as a therapist, and I have distance.
Got it.
And it's one-sided. But when I'm unwinding, I'm not going to contain. Right? When I need to relax after 7 hours of working with people in deep pain, where I've held myself, I need a safe place to unleash Jason. And I'm very particular in who gets to see the unfiltered version of me, because I have to trust that it will land well, because unfiltered Jason is a lot different than filtered Jason. These are two different people.
Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. So I want to bring it to one thing that is also very common now in the world of politics is misinformation. I think we have a crisis of what is valid information and what is falsified and what is distorted. And the question I have is, do we challenge political falsehoods with clients? If someone says Hillary Hillary Clinton is a pedophile and there's no evidence of it, as an example. And we have perfect evidence that that is mathematically possible, which I don't know how I'd have it. But let's say we do have perfect evidence of it. Do we dispute that belief? And I don't know the answer to that. What are your thoughts on it? Trying to challenge political falsehoods with clients.
I've never gone that far, honestly. That's something as a therapist I'm not willing to correct.
Because? So far, I'm leaning towards agreeing with you on this, but I want to know why.
I mean, that's a great question. I'm thinking of this one person in particular, like, who could go on and on and on and on and on. And I just validate, like, that's just one topic that I would validate. I don't have to agree with it, but I'll listen. I don't go as far to even challenge it. I just listen. And then it's like, as the anger passes or the frustration passes, I kind of redirect to something else. I'm not willing to go there with that. And I feel like it's because it gets deeper, but not in a way that I feel like is going to heal you with what you really have going on.
Well, right. I'm philosophy that conspiracy theories or misinformation that people get attached to is a symptom. And so I think there's a way to redirect it to the deeper work of why are certain people drawn to what I would say is clearly misinformed or highly implausible. I don't even want to say impossible. I'm going to use the word implausible. Technically, Hillary Clinton could be a pedophile. I don't know. Or like a lizard monster from like the center of the earth. Like there's so many things like that. This is a weird analogy. My work with schizophrenia has helped me with this. Because with schizophrenia, I'm used to delusional beliefs that are just not plausible. And the lessons are that you don't challenge them right away. You don't challenge a delusion, you join. You have to build rapport before you ever do a challenge. So there's a sequencing thing. I think for me, I'd want to build the rapport first, and long before I'd ever consider challenging. And I may never challenge political beliefs. I don't know, or political misinformation. So far, I haven't. I haven't challenged. I haven't said like that's factually false.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when I do that, what would be the consequence, which is the client and I would get into an argument over source. Where are you getting your information? Your sources are crap. Why do you read those sources? You're an idiot for reading them.
Yeah.
And suddenly it would just become a slugfest on trying to destroy the source information of the other, rather than us as a team working against the goals they had in therapy. Right?
Yeah, I feel like I've definitely had to do that, like, personally, and I feel like a lot, obviously, hence why friendships were destroyed, but
right.
I feel like people definitely can relate to that on a social media platform, but I've learned to not entertain it, I guess. It's not that I don't have a voice and I'm not willing to correct somebody, but you don't really get as far over an internet bash or like going back and forth. Because some people are honestly just really set in their way of thinking with when it comes to stuff like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I would highly recommend, when it starts getting hot, like, don't even entertain it. Because your thoughts, they don't disappear. You'll still have your beliefs and what you stand strong for. And so will other people. It's not going to go very far on a social platform.
So what about with a client in the room saying like, I believe this, do you agree? So I'm actually creating like the nightmare client. A politically charged, angry client that's going to put me in the hot seat and demand I agree with certain beliefs or ideas. And I guess that was kind of my hope, is to like have a discussion about this, because I feel like this has certainly happened to clinicians already. It's going to start happening more and more. And I think it's going to start to happen to you and I more and more over the next few years.
I think I would feel comfortable telling somebody, maybe not exactly what stance I take, but just if I heard something that was like completely left field, that was like offensive or went against, like, truly personally, like I took it personal in that moment, I think I feel comfortable just saying, like, I disagree, or you're allowed to disagree, and it doesn't need to be a a space where we're what's the word, challenging each other, but I think it's okay for people to disagree, and we'll just leave it at that. Like, that's kind of how I would probably leave it.
You're fired. That's my thought. If you do that, you're fired. You don't believe me.
Oh, the client saying this?
Yeah. My thought is, if I answer their question and admit that I disagree, they would fire me on the spot.
I don't think then maybe we examine the rapport, because I feel like if your rapport is healthy enough, like, they would be able to respect your boundary with not self-disclosing. And if you did see something a different way and were honest and like, hey, like, I disagree, respectfully disagree. If they say you're fired, like, I would challenge the rapport there and be like, it's better that they probably just find someone who thinks and believes the same way they do. Isn't that the point in therapy, though, to be challenged? Not on your political beliefs, but you shouldn't feel threatened.
Well, this is why I think I was so anxious about this topic. Yeah, the whole point of therapy is to be challenged. Politics doesn't feel safe enough for it to feel like a challenge. It feels like an assault.
Yeah.
Or feels like a tribalism issue, or like, how could you ever know my experience if you're on the other side of the aisle?
Yeah.
You'll never understand me. In a way that no other topic. Like, I've openly shared I'm in recovery, and I'll tell clients who ask, "Are you in recovery?" And I'll say yes, because that makes them feel safe. It has never felt polarizing, even to people not in recovery who discover that I'm in recovery. It doesn't seem to like affect our relationship. Politics would, in my experience. And again, I'm coming from someone who's lost friends over political discussion.
Yeah.
Friends I've known for 20 years. So if I could lose a friend of 20 years from a political discussion, I could lose a client who's known me for 6 sessions way easier, who actually is paying me money. You have to remember, they're paying us. So if they're coming to me wanting healing, looking for services, and I answer some of these charged questions, why wouldn't they fire me? And just go find someone else? And that's the other question is, when do we refer? When is it ethical to say, your worldview is so different than mine, I don't know if I can help you. I don't know if I don't know if we're a functional match as clinician and client. And I'm curious if you have thoughts on, when would you refer a client due to political differences alone?
I think it's definitely different when you go into a private sector, because now your livelihood depends on,
Like mine.
clientele. But I also think we're not a master of all trades. So like, one of the things, and I don't openly admit this, but when someone's like really in need of like intense trauma work, like, I'm the first one to be like, you need to see a trauma specialist, because right here, that is not like what I'm comfortable with.
Right.
I've done great trauma work, but very like, I didn't necessarily know exactly that that's what that person needed at the time, but it turned into that through trust and eventually getting there. Like, and I'm talking people I've had for over 2 years, like really great trauma work. But off the bat, when I'm like, I don't know you, you don't know me, and you're like, I need like trauma, like, and it's so fresh and open wound, I'm the first to be like, you definitely should see somebody whose specialty is EMDR or trauma related. So I think that when I don't feel comfortable in my scope, or.
So is political differences a scope issue? Which is a great point you're making up. Why not? Why is this not considered a difference of scope? Because it's, when I go to workshops or trainings, there's like trainings on how to work with people from different cultures.
Yeah.
Right. You're supposed to be culturally aware and in tuned. The aisle difference is a different culture.
Okay. I think this might help you. Ready?
Yeah.
Because you're right. You're going to get people that it's fresh and they're going to want to. I actively have a client now that is just like this, but I validate. I don't entertain it. I don't be combative. I don't challenge it. I literally validate. And then we move on. Like, it's almost like I just got to vent. But who's to say you might not get that client, right? That's okay with just moving on. So,
right.
This isn't the same, but it's similar. We had a huge LGBTQ community, like a movement. It's not going anywhere, and it's like it's a thing, right? And
Mhm.
we gotta adjust, adapt, be educated. Same with being trauma informed. What's the other big thing? I feel like I'm missing something. Oh, the cultural differences, like you said, there's a whole, like, I forget what they call that. Cultural diversity, I guess you could say, is like a whole
Right.
movement that's not going anywhere. So I see politics like that. You
Do
have
you-
this uncomfortable thing. You don't know, maybe you do know which side of the fence you stand on. Some days you're certain, some days you're not. Maybe you agree or approve or disagree, disapprove, whatever. But I just see the person as a person. I don't have to be your best friend. So that's kind of how it's like I can educate myself. I can be aware. I can respect you. So I can work with you. I think the difference and the referral would come in if they couldn't do that in exchange. So like if you come to me and you want to work on, let's say, I don't know, your recovery or your relationship dynamics, but it's always politics is always driving whatever you got going on at home. Like now we're getting off of the real issue. So if they can't,
what if politics is the real issue?
it could be
Right. Like they have trauma related to political
trauma,
stress, political trauma, right? They have hurt because they lost friendships over politics.
Yeah.
What if the main reason a person's seeking therapy is politics? And again, I don't have an answer for this. I don't know if ethically I should refer them out if they're coming mainly to talk politics because they have pain around it and they're on the other side of the aisle.
Then maybe for you,
answer
when
for
it
that.
would feel threatening, like if they couldn't respect your boundaries around it, like you have to be safe as well. So that's what I would say. Like it's twofold. You can't have a client wanting to feel safe and unthreatened, but you feel unsafe and threatened. Like it's not going to work.
Okay.
So I guess it would just be however you respond to it.
So in other words, if I said I'm not going to disclose, but I'm going to help you explore yours, and they said, no, I need to know
Yes.
Quantifiably where you stand on all these issues to work with you, and I were to hold the line, they probably self-refer is sort of your philosophy.
Yeah, it depends on exactly how far they were willing to push that. You could say that, and they could have a response like, "Oh, I respect that," or they could be like, "No, well, no, that's not fair. I need to know because then that's going to make my decision." Then that's like toxic. So,
right.
Maybe this new coin term you just gave to me is political trauma.
Political trauma. I think we're going to see more political trauma.
Tell me that would be in like a
DSM. I mean, I'll give you an example. I have a client who's a man of color who is afraid that certain political regimes will have him deported. That's traumatizing.
That is traumatizing.
He's afraid certain powerful institutions will hate him and marginalize him worse and look for reasons to kick him out of the country. That's why he voted the way he did. He voted because he felt targeted and traumatized.
You can help a client like that though, right?
Well, a couple things. He's never pulling for my experience. He's just wanting to work on the trauma. So he's not doing the nightmare thing of like, where do you stand? I need to know all of this about you if I'm ever going to trust or respect you. He's not doing that. But politics is one of the driving topics of our work. We happen to align a lot, which makes it easier, right? I have a lot of clients that are very political, but we happen to align. So that's a non-issue. Tonight's was really about how to work with people across the aisle. I think because my fantasy is if it can happen in therapy, maybe it could eventually happen in society.
Oh yeah.
Therapy is a safe microcosm of society. And so any advances in therapy could translate over a large scale eventually. And even in the safety and confines of therapy, it still doesn't feel safe when it's across the aisle sometimes. And that's me being vulnerable. Again, why I wanted to talk about this tonight. I'm honestly at a loss.
I think it's okay to not, for any of us to not always have all the answers all the time. You know, and coming from a therapist or coach, like saying that, like we don't have all the answers to everything. And these are really scary, vulnerable topics. And we're in a culture now that's it is threatened. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. There's crazy news every day. We never know. So I think that puts it's a common ground. Like we all kind of can relate in some ways to not being sure about it all, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's okay to be not okay with it.
For now, it has to be. I guess I wanted to end on the topic of voter apathy.
Yeah.
And sort of, as a clinician, how to interact with that. And what do you do with voter apathy? Is it something you challenge? Do you assume it's a symptom of a larger sense of powerlessness, helplessness? Is it depression? Is it something else? Or is it a God-given exercise right that I don't have to participate in political discussion as part of the freedoms inherited by the United States? Any thoughts about voter apathy?
Oh my goodness. I don't think enough people ask, so it's something I've never really thought about.
Yeah.
But can you give me like an example?
I feel like we just passed the most intense midterm election in the history of our country. I feel like voter turnout was the highest it's ever been. It was super close all over the place. It's still close. There's actually, the results aren't even fully in. I think Democrats got the Senate. I'm pretty sure Republicans are going to get the House. If a client came in and said, I don't care about any of it, what, as a clinician, what would I do with that? Right? That's sort of the question. What do I do with someone when they walk in and say, I don't care, couldn't care less, doesn't matter to me? Is that something worth exploring, investigating, or is that something you leave alone?
I mean, for me, I've been on both sides where, you know, in one season I really cared, and another I could care less based on my views. But again, it's something I don't take personal because I've been that person on both sides, the voter
Right.
and the non-voter.
Yeah.
I've literally been like,
perspective.
People have not chased me, but like literally followed me down the street, yelling in my face, like ear, literally. Like there are people in other countries, you know, who died to have your right. Like, why not exercise? Like literally very aggressive.
That sounds scary.
I've had those experiences. So I get why people are really passionate about it. I also get why it's important, but I also respect people's choice to exercise their right either direction. But I'm not saying this happened overnight. Like this is just me as a being, you know, now almost 34. Like it took me a while to get to this point, but now I can say it's gotten a lot easier to not personalize these things.
Yeah, I certainly would like to believe that I could not take it personally. In terms of clinical direction, I would probably have to seek supervision. I don't clinically know what to do, because my assumption is, well, they must be depressed, but that's not necessarily true. My assumption is that they're not informed, but that may not be true. I'd be certainly a little curious about it, but because I have the opposite experience, I have the opposite of voter apathy. I have like intense voter passion.
Yeah.
I took off the entire morning on November 8th to savor what I could do, to savor the vote, to savor the experience.
You're passionate.
I took myself out to a nice diner meal, made a whole day of it. I treated myself and kind of made it a thing. And I get a sort of sense of deep patriotism during voting days, because my philosophy is most days no one cares what I have to say. On that day, everybody cares what I have to say.
Can I be vulnerable really quick?
Yes.
I'll give you another scenario or something to think about when you come across this. For me personally, one of the experiences I had with voting, I felt like it was so overly complicated, and B, that literally I got so excited, got there early, got in line, to then find out I didn't know the process of switching over an address. Like, as stupid as that sounds, I did not know. So to find out that my vote may or may not make it into
on a technicality,
I felt this sense of powerlessness, like, and insignificance. I don't know. It was really weird. And one of the first times I took it really personal, like, I care so much, but what if it doesn't even matter?
voting confusion. Not always a hot topic, but I certainly might be part of the voter apathy or larger umbrella. I know the one election, I forget who was it. The people tried to circle the one candidate, but they accidentally clicked the other one, so it's not clear who they were voting for, and that was a big contention. Right? Remember that? I think that was the Bush Gore.
Yep.
Where like the names were like here, and then the circles were like between them, and like who's the circle for this candidate? Why is it not? Why would they ever design it so it wasn't brutally obvious? So things like that. But yeah, no, that sounds awful. That on a technicality, your vote may not have mattered.
I mean, I got over it, but in the moment, I remember being so upset that I was one of the few times I voiced it on. Like, I was like, now I get why people come on Facebook and just rip the government an a-hole.
Yeah.
But it was really my fault. I should have like changed my address.
Sure. So
but I don't know. This was really good. I feel like if you don't mind, when we do wrap up, I would like to just, my final question, I guess, would be for you. What do you hope to see?
My hope is that if this ever is brought up in this clinical session, that I don't run screaming from it or try to deflect away to something else. I want to believe that I could tolerate the discomfort.
Yeah.
And apply the level of curiosity I would to any other topic, knowing that this topic is uniquely triggering for me as an individual and for society collectively. My hope of just airing it out with you was just sort of preparation for that, and to hear your thoughts and opinions on it. Again,
did any of it sit with you?
No, I resonated sort of, you know, I can get convoluted with things, and I resonate with just the idea of like, again, I'm here to be a human with a human. Yeah. I'm here to practice compassion. I'm here to practice curiosity. I don't need to know the answers. Those themes resonated with me. And I guess that was sort of my hope, is like, I wanted to begin this conversation because I think a lot of clinicians, when this topic's brought up, they'll say, "Oh, that's interesting. Anyway, how's your family going, or how's this going?" Like, I think it's tempting to run from it, and I want to believe that I would do the opposite, because I don't want to run from any topics anymore. I want to face them head on. This is one of the scariest ones.
I think for me, I definitely got some more clarity on that. There's so many different layers that really do strike a chord for people on a personal level. And when you really realize that, you can have more of a compassion. Yeah. Instead of getting defensive.
Exactly.
But
all right. Well,
all right. Well, this was fun.
A well-earned dinner.
Yes, a well-earned dinner. All right. Well, that's a wrap for Politics Walking a Fine Line. I'm sure there'll be more discussion about it, but thank you for coming on. And I will have this posted on my YouTube channel, Crystal DeFeo. So I'll make sure I post it on there, so other people, if they want to jump on, they can watch it at a later time. All right.
Great. All right. Thanks as always, Crystal.
All right. Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye.